Hello, Pirates. Welcome to week 6 of e-learning. So this week we are focused pretty much on pathogens. And when we're looking at pathogens, we're really focused on things in our bodies that cause illness. All right, so with your notes on 141 or another sheet of paper, you guys just want to set up a nice T-chart. And we're looking at things that cause illness. So illnesses that you guys have maybe have in the past. They are typically caused by either a virus, a bacteria, a fungus, or maybe even a parasite. We are really going to focus on the virus and the bacteria, although parasites and funguses are actually very interesting. But today we're going to focus on what is the difference between a bacteria and a virus. And this is important because people use these terms interchangeably, even though they're very different things, and they're treated very differently, medically. So if you think back to that pre-assessment you took, we're going to use those characteristics to really look at the differences between bacteria and viruses. So the first thing is understanding that one is living and one is not. So a virus is non-living. So viruses are non-living. They are not living things. So if you are infected with a virus, you have an infection of something that's not living. And when you have a bacterial infection, you are infected by living things, by living cells. The virus, because it's not a living thing, it does not have a cell wall. So there's no cell wall. The virus actually has genetic information, a protein coat, no cell wall. Bacteria, on the other hand, they do have a cell wall. If you remember, they're prokaryotes and they have a cell wall, which is different than a cell wall in a plant, but it is important to what type of antibiotic you take, what type of cell wall it has, what its structure is. Because viruses and bacteria, like I said, they both have genetic information. Viruses have either DNA or RNA. So DNA or RNA. And this is important because RNA mutates more frequently. And when RNA mutates more frequently, we end up having viruses that change. And we don't build up immunity to them the same way we do DNA viruses. So DNA viruses, we could take a vaccine and get long-term immunity. For an RNA virus, the virus mutates and then the vaccine is no longer effective, like the flu, which is why you have to get that flu vaccine every season or every couple of years. Bacteria, because they're cells, they have both DNA and they have RNA. So they have both DNA and RNA. They have genetic information, and then they have RNA, messenger RNA to make proteins. Viruses, they have no ribosomes. So they have no ribosomes, they are not cells. And remember, ribosomes are protein factories, and if viruses are made of proteins and they can't make proteins because they don't have ribosomes, then they have to rely on a cell to make their proteins. Now bacteria, they do have ribosomes. And again, those ribosomes are protein factories. And this is important because it is key to understanding how viruses infect cells. So a virus needs a host cell in order to reproduce. So it requires a host. So when you have a viral infection, the virus is using your cells as a host to make more viruses. So a host cell is required for reproduction. Now bacteria, when they reproduce, they just reproduce asexually. So they just copy their genetic information and then they split. So asexual reproduction. When we look at treatment or prevention for a virus, the way that a virus is, once you get a virus, we can use some antiviral drugs to slow down the attachment of viruses to the host cell. That's what antiviral meds are. But once you have a virus, your body kind of has to work through it. So the best way to control viruses in a population is to prevent people from getting viruses in the first place. And so the way that we prevent viruses from spreading is we prevent them from having available hosts. And so we prevent them with vaccines. So we have lots of people take vaccines, they build up immunity, they can't get the virus, and now the virus can't spread from person to person. Right now, you guys can kind of think, because we don't have a vaccine against the coronavirus, how are we ensuring that it's not spreading from person to person? We're keeping people separated. And if you're not around other people, then the virus can't spread to you. So we prevent with a vaccine, or we can treat people who have a viral infection with some antiviral meds. Now, because the coronavirus is new, we don't necessarily have antiviral drugs and vaccines specific to the COVID virus. Now, they found some antiviral drugs that are promising, which is a positive thing. Hopefully, with research and science, we'll have something that we're using here regularly and is effective soon. With a bacteria, treatment for bacterial infections, and many of you guys have probably had bacterial infections over your lifetime, but we use antibiotics. So an antibiotic is anti a living thing. So it's against the bacteria, antiviral against a virus. So if you have a bacterial infection, you take an antibiotic. An antibiotic will not be effective against a virus because it is not living. And maybe you've had strep throat before, and with strep throat, they'll do the strep test to see if you have a viral infection or a bacterial infection. If you have strep, they'll give you an antibiotic. If you don't, they send you home and say get plenty of fluids and plenty of rest, right? All right. The last thing we're going to look at here are just what are some examples of these different things. So when we're looking at examples of a virus, some examples of viruses that you guys are probably familiar with is, what we're dealing with right now. COVID-19, that is virus, and the 19 is for the year that it began. So it began in 2019. All right, and the C is part of it being a coronavirus, and it's explaining it, so it's an acronym. Ebola is a virus. Zika virus, you guys probably remember everyone talking about Zika a few years ago. The cold, most of you have had a cold. Most of us have about 2 or 3 colds per year. If you've ever had the flu, that is caused by a virus. And, things like HIV are also caused by a virus. Those are some examples of some viruses. And then some examples of some bacterial infections are things, like I said, like strep throat. You've had strep throat before. E. coli is the most common food poisoning. Salmonella poisoning, bacteria, cholera. Bacteria cause things like ulcers, Lyme disease. There's lots of different things out there. So what you guys are going to do in your next task, you're going to take a picture of your notes, upload them to the assignment. And then in the discussion, you're going to look at a list of pathogens. And there's a list of different viruses and bacteria. And what you guys are going to do is you guys are going to pick a pathogen, anything on the list. There's an attachment that has some information about most of them, but not a couple of them. Or you can get your info somewhere else, but you're going to do a little mini research project on your pathogen, create a model of some sort, doesn't have to be fancy, and then you're going to post it on, the next day's assignment in the comments. Hope you guys are doing well. Stay safe. Stay socially distanced so you don't get the virus or spread the virus. Hope you guys are doing well.